What if 1982 fit in your pocket? All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
1982 in the palm of your hand. New portables of the Commodore 64 and ZX Spectrum.
Zero for Xerox. Inventing GUI and losing it.
The Trojan Mouse. The BBC looks back at the Computer Literacy Project.
And more classic horror gaming, along with a classic Apple workstation on FPGA, coming up on this week's show for the week of Saturday, the 9th of May, 2026.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
For those of you on audio, I have some distressing news. There is a guest this week. He is not bald. He is not wearing glasses. Some of our video viewers give us pushback on this. Welcome, Kevin Toms, to This Week in Retro.
It's good to be here. Thank you. Sorry, I don't match the standard visual format, you know.
Kevin Toms is joining us this week. I'm Dave, as always. Chris, who are you this week?
I'm Chris, I guess, this week. Yep.
And I remain Jason.
Kevin is the legendary creator of Football Manager, the first business sim that really went big. A huge game in the UK in the 80s. And eventually the name would end up, I'm told by Kevin, not to his financial benefit, going to Sports Interactive. And what was Championship Manager would become the game was always inspired by Football Manager. It is now one of the biggest gaming franchise in the world. Kevin left the games industry for decades, returning about 10 years ago to go back to the roots of Football Manager to make it a more accessible, fun game. So what have you done since 2016, Kevin?
But I have done something. Yeah, and then what I did was much by popular demand, actually. I had a few hundred followers, and I posted online that, you know, I could recreate my original Football Manager game for mobiles. I was developing on mobile at the time. And I got such a positive response that I started the process. And so it became what became Football Star Manager for iOS and Android, and it's now on Steam as well. But it's very much a recreation of the gameplay of my original, but adapted for modern devices.
And now you're working on something else as well.
Yeah, there's two other things. One is that I'm working on what I see as my last football management game, which will be published in the next few months. But it's going to be a bit of an evolution because it'll be free to download, and I'll be cooperating or talking a lot with users as they play it. So I expect that to be an evolving game. And the other thing came out of Crash Live, which I went to last year. Now, it's very nice for me to go to events like that because I meet a lot of players of my original game, and which still has a lot of affection for people. So it's quite a positive and pleasant experience. I love meeting the people as well because, to be honest with you, when I first did it, there was no way to meet people unless I went to game shows, whereas now, because of the internet, you can talk to people online. It's quite different. And so it's very much an opportunity. And at Crash Live, I met Alan and from Midnight Brew, and that eventually hatched the idea of doing a box set of the original game on cassette on Spectrum. And in the box set is also a really nice program stroke magazine, you might say, which has a lot of the original story, but also some great photos of, from the time as well. It's a really nice piece of work, which will be part of the box set. So it's a bit of a souvenir box set, and that'll be out soon.
I mean, you started in the games industry before there really was a games industry. You started by, I believe, mail order, and then eventually went into shops back when the UK games industry was just a tiny thing, and now it's ended up being a giant. And what is the descendants of your game is now one of the biggest in the world. Yeah.
I mean, it really was before there were any retail outlets. And you know, sometimes I'm a speaker explaining this, which people find hard to believe, that when I released that game and others were releasing games, the only way to sell computer games was by mail order, direct to the public, by post, with checks and postal orders.
With you always put a picture of your face on the adverts as well. Kevin Tom's Football Manager.
No, on the
Football Manager.
Not initially. Not initially.
No, initially, no.
No. That's obviously because it became known as people think it was always. But no, actually, that came about because I was attending. So it just said Football Manager, and there's several iterations of the packaging before that. But I was attending computer game shows, and when I was like demonstrating the game, people would be talking to me, and then I would say, "Oh, the reason I did that," or they played the game, and I would say, "Oh, the reason I did it that way, or the reason I did it that way," and they say, "Oh, you wrote it," and they would get very excited. Then they realized they were not talking to a salesman; they were talking to the author of the creator of the game, and they got very engaged. And I just thought, hang on, isn't this business like music or books? You're more interested in the author than you are in the publisher. And I started putting myself in there. I mean, obviously, I'm taking a risk because if it's rubbish, I get criticism too. But I had faith in what I was doing, and I started putting my name and identity on the games and in the marketing. And I thought everybody else would do the same. But I realized eventually that some publishers didn't want their developers to become too famous because they might go and work for someone else. But of course, it was my own company, so I could do it. And it became established as a good thing.
Fantastic. We should go on with the show because there is so much to cover today. There's new hardware coming out. Jason, isn't there?
There's quite a bit of new hardware, depending on what your taste is in early 80s tech, but we will talk about that in just a moment. There was a documentary a few years ago which declared 1982 the greatest geek year ever. And that's a sentiment which, if you're, say, under the age of 45, the documentary might be persuasive. But if you lived through that year, you either already feel it very deeply or you are already convinced that it's some other year. And usually the discussion centers around film releases from that year because it seems that every major studio release was either a contemporary blockbuster or a genre-defining highlight, or in some cases both. You had E.T., Poltergeist, Blade Runner, you had Tron and The Thing, never mind the first cinematic outings of Sylvester Stallone's John Rambo character and the breakout stardom of Eddie Murphy. Now, taste or taste, and maybe yours are different. Maybe you're the kind of geek who can't acknowledge that it could possibly be an iconic year without a new Star Wars release, for example, or you're an Alien franchise purist. Or you may mark the peak of culture a year later when Metal Storm, The Destruction of Jared Sin, and Space Hunter, Adventures in the Forbidden Zone hit theaters. I personally did feel the true rightness of 1982 before there was an international digital apparatus to debate these kinds of things. But again, your mileage may vary. Does anybody here, just on the film merits, want to bolster or erode 1982's case for the greatest geek year of all?
It's hard to argue with those films. If you look at just films, it's hard to argue with those films. But I would say for me, it's when I got a personal computer. Until I had one of those, it wasn't a geek thing.
Mm-hmm. Gentlemen's?
I launched Football Manager, so it has to be a big year for me.
There we go.
Definitely.
January 1982.
Beautiful. I can't remember what I actually got in 1982. I'm just going to roll with it. Yep.
Sent to bed early.
Probably.
But if you are someone who doubts 1982's supremacy, and it's because you're mostly looking at films, well, in the words of 1982 film megavillain Khan Noonien Singh, I make you a counter-proposal. Because 1982 was also the debut year of two home computers which, more than any others, are the standard bearers of 8-bit computer loyalty and enthusiasm. Those two, of course, being the Commodore 64 and the Sinclair ZX Spectrum. Now, we can argue about their quality, their goodness, their superiority, their influence, and or versus any of the computers released around that time. But I don't think it's debatable that these two are the computers for which people are willing to put their money where their mouth is time and time again. And thanks to submissions from Starcade 2084 and Elk 1984, I see a pattern there, we got word that a collaboration between Retro Games Limited and Evercade makers Blaze is coming at us with new handheld implementations of 1982's cutting-edge tech marvels in the form of the C64 handheld and the Spectrum handheld. These are clamshell devices very reminiscent of a Nintendo DS, although with a 4.3-inch IPS screen, each boasting a typical D-pad plus a 4-button diamond cluster, an additional row of 4 buttons above that are used in-game, plus 3 special buttons for navigating the emulator control window. There's a 2,000 milliamp hour battery that's charged by USB-C. Each one comes with 25 games preloaded. It's a different lineup in each one, and more on those in a minute. They have a micro SD expansion card for other titles. I'm imagining that the emulation system is going to be pretty similar, and things like file name trickery will let you unlock advanced emulation features as on the desktop variants of these products, but we'll find that out in time. Time Extension has published some tech specs and compiled the game lists, and the lists are weird is the first word that comes to mind for me. I know that the Spectrum list has some legends for that platform, including Head Over Heels, Great Escape, School Days, among some others. The C64 release seems to be emphasizing some of the newer games released for that system. There are some older favorites like Speedball 2, the now delicensed Bruce Lee game, and Paradroid. But things like seeing the Electronic Arts classic Archon on Spectrum, but not on the C64, where honestly it really shines, is pretty shocking. I know that these things are licensed differently, but it's very unusual. Apart from a total lack of football management or other spreadsheet-like entertainment, does anything jump out at anybody else about those games?
Someone has to mention the Spectrum Vega. I mean, the Spectrum Vega, the handheld, that was an absolute disaster. This is the first time that Spectrum's come back to the handheld, and of course I'm thinking Spectrum Vega, but I do agree on the list of games. It's a little bit unusual. But maybe they spent a lot of time looking at playing these games on a tiny screen and thought these are the games that actually work as best on it. But I don't know. I mean, I'm not convinced that that's the case.
Looking at the Spectrum list, because obviously I've got the Spectrum. It's similar but different, which is nice. But yeah, nothing really jumps out. And the ones that I would sort of mention are ones that are included on the Spectrum anyway. So yeah.
Starquake is a fantastic game that nobody talks about, and that's the closest you'll get to the kind of a tick attack games or night lore. Is it Night Lore I'm thinking of? The Stamper Brothers games, that Ultimate games. But yeah, I mean, where's Jetpack?
I guess as soon as I see an SD card, I go, the games list means nothing anyway, because you're going to put whatever you want on it.
Kevin.
Yeah, the odd part for me, of course, is handheld. That's what I was doing when I recreated Football Star Manager, or Football Manager as Football Star Manager for mobiles. So making it appropriate was what I was doing. It's an interesting comparison. As you say, some of those games aren't suited because they weren't originally designed for handheld.
So these units are planned to retail for $130 or £110. For a 20 spot more in either currency, you will get a limited and exclusive edition of Crash or Zap magazine, respectively, according to the platform. And they say there will be just 2,000 of those editions sold each. So the value proposition for one of these handhelds, to me, is pretty clear. I mean, yeah, granted, for give or take half as much money, you can get yourself an all-singing, all-dancing handheld emulator machine that's going to be a lot more flexible. I have bought my share of them, and my experience with them does tend to splutter because I find it challenging to remember, like, all right, which button's going to map to which function in which emulator, or I get tired of going through the settings menu and, let's say like the SDL Vice Commodore 64 emulator to perform, kind of bespoke button mappings for each of the games that needs them. The nice thing about these types of releases that come from RGL is that they've already done the work to, hack and remap those key functions to the D-pad, that button row, that diamond cluster. And I think, that using their carousel front end is actually a very nice, consistent, pleasant experience. If you are the kind of person who's up for rolling your own and dealing with those rougher edges, that's absolutely a way to go. And I don't think that they're really looking to change your mind on that. In any case, like the fact that these products are coming to retail is undeniably a big, big win for these two personal computing titans from 1982. And I don't know, I can easily imagine a marketing campaign involving a 1982 cinema icon like Elliot from E.T. or Flynn from Tron, slipping one of these into his pocket as he kind of rides off on his BMX bike into the distance. Dave, you kind of teed up your thought comparing this to the Vega, which, I mean, yeah, it was a thing, and it wasn't a great thing for a lot of people. But on the merits of these, any particular thoughts about what they're putting out there?
They seem very poor value. There's a whole lot of inexpensive handholds you can buy for much less than these, and the specs in these are significantly worse than those handhelds that you can get for around half the price of this. They are, of course, just emulation. They come with preloaded games, all set up and ready to go, which is nice. We're going to give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that there's no configuration needed. These games will work intuitively from when you launch them. But the battery life is significantly worse than the cheaper competition, and even the extra money for a case and magazine seems sharp. The magazine should come with it, and the case should be a tenner. I'll definitely pass on these. I don't like them at all, but they do have one thing going for them. you can't easily find a screen as good as that around very much easily, unless you go for Blaze's own machines. But that is a problem too, because the aspect ratio is completely wrong in these. It's 7:4 instead of 4:3. That means these devices have black bars if you play them in the right aspect ratio, or the image is significantly stretched if you don't. So it's a nice screen, but it's not fit for this purpose at all. If you remove the black bars, the 4.3-inch screen is exactly the same as a 3.5-inch screen. The same as these kind of Mayu Mini handhelds at less than half the price of this. So my recommendation is a 1-to-1 screen is a good compromise. So you can stretch without it being noticeable, or you can have the right aspect ratio with only small black bars depending on whichever device you're emulating. The Powkiddy RGB30 has a 720 by 724-inch screen. It's only $70, over twice the battery capacity, and it can do arcades, micros, consoles, handhelds. It won't look as good on your shelf if that's what you want here. If you want something nice on your shelf that you can play, then it won't look as good as this if you want a Commodore 64 or ZX Spectrum. But I would argue that something with a wide screen on it just looks wrong. They should have found a way to do 4:3.
Yeah, I actually agree, Dave. I'm all for having the correct aspect ratio. I suspect what they're probably doing here is to keep costs down. Let's face it, they're probably going to be using the same carousel as they've already bought for the larger systems. And the way that works on the Spectrum is it's designed to plug into a modern widescreen TV. The carousel, therefore, is 16:9. But once you jump into a game, it's 4:3. And you have the choice of black bars or one of these, retro bezels. So maybe they're going to do, but I get your point, because you're going to be reducing the viewing area once you're in the game. In terms of the games, I mean, I think so long as the games are carefully curated and are games that, let's say, work with standard joystick controls, then you can get away with that with a D-pad and even one fire button. You don't even need the three, right? So this could work quite well for that. Whilst I know there are other devices, a lot of those either packaging games that they aren't licensed to do so, or they rely on you filling the thing with ROMs yourself. So I do like the idea of these kind of systems coming out that are perhaps not even primarily marketed at nerds like us. They're marketed at people that aren't even necessarily in the hobby yet, that see this thing, it's an impulse buy, and they go, oh yeah, heck yeah, I remember the Commodore 64 or the Spectrum, and it'd be great to play that in my pocket, and off you go. So I like it as a product. Whether the pricing's right, well, I guess time will tell. And if it's not, I'm sure these things will drop over time, because they have done that with other products. But yeah, I like it. Probably not for me, because I've already got the full-size Spectrum, so I don't have a use for this, but I like that they've done it. I
would say that I do feel the C64 and the Spectrum are good products, and I think they're ideal for people to pick up in their shops and take home and plug into their telly. I think they're fine for that, but I don't think this product is. I think the screen will end up being too small and frustrating. People will see it stretch. I mean, stretching doesn't give you any more data on your screen. You've still got a tiny screen in front of you, or you see the black bar and you've got a tiny little screen for it. Are you going to manage to do pixel perfect jumps in Manic Miner on this? I'm not so sure you could. So I'm not sure this is going to end up being a good device, whereas the Spectrum is a good device, I feel, and the C64 are good devices, I feel. The C64 Mini, I'm going back to call it that. C64 Mini is a good device, and I'm not so sure this is.
Kevin, did you have anything on these?
One thing comes to mind, that it's quite remarkable still that something from 1982 has still got selling points today, all these years later. I've been doing a series on my own socials about some of the old machines that didn't survive, and there's so many of them, just so many of them that were trying to break into the market, and yet the Spectrum and the 64 still remembered today. It's amazing.
And it was a particularly busy week in Commodore 64 news, as, once again, just after we recorded our previous episode, the new Commodore announced its next upcoming product, which is pretty on the nose. They are not moving on to the next generation of Commodore technology and launching the throwback desktop Amiga that many people have been clamoring for. Instead, Commodore has announced the Commodore 64C Ultimate, and that really is the immediate successor to the classic C64 design. Commodore does continue to sell the original design that they launched last year. They claim the new 64C variant will ship in September to pre-order buyers. As of this recording, both are selling for the same price of $300 US. Now, if you are not super steeped in the minute details of Commodore 8-bit models, the easiest way to understand the 64C is a Commodore 64 in a different case. It does have a slightly more user-friendly keyboard angle. That's it. It's fundamentally the same machine. The main selling distinction at the time was actually in software, as Commodore bundled GEOS 1.5 with the computer in a valiant attempt to breathe more, serious productivity life into the machine. But GEOS was already bundled with the 64 Ultimate last year. I have not seen any sign that they are further expanding the software in any way just yet. The press release does flat out say, the slimline Commodore 64C Ultimate will offer identical performance to its predecessor, unquote. It's tough to get any clearer than that. The 64C was a chance for, was the original Commodore to visually refresh their 64 in 1986, 4 years after the initial release, and they modernized the styling to get it more in line with the rest of their computer family of the time.
Am I right to say, and this is a question for you, Jason, because I don't really answer to it, am I right to say that while they did over time cost down to reduce the cost of the guts inside it, there was no kind of line in the sand where the C64C meant a particular cost down and the bread bin didn't? It was just that the cases were not related to the various cost downs that they did over time.
Oh, the answer is it varied. I do believe. I'm not 100%. But so some of the 64Cs did have the older motherboards. They call the long board, which had itself gone through a few iterations. So you can't simply by looking at the exterior say, oh, I know exactly what the guts of that machine.
That's right.
Is because there were further consolidations down the line. Fewer RAM chips and so forth, and that's something that in whenever those last ones were rolling off the line in the early 90s was different than the ones in 86, 87. So yes, there was sort of the guts cost reduction and the exterior revamp were not one-to-one related. It was an ongoing process both ways. Yes. Which I sort of was going to go on to say.
Sorry, I didn't mean to kick the legs out from under you.
Commodore's cost reducing the design under the hood. They're consolidating chips down. They eventually get to a physically smaller motherboard. 64Cs actually shipped with a few different keycap variations over its life. The one that new Commodore seems to be most prominently featuring is the later variation where all of the writing is on the top of the key rather than having some information on the vertical face as it was originally done. This presumably saved on printing costs in 1986 and will again in 2026. There were other enhancements that would show up usually under the hood as those things were being refined and cost reduced down. Like I have found I generally prefer the quality of video out in the 64Cs that I now own compared to the older models. And then there's the matter of the SID chip, which again is not a one-to-one thing because that thing went through a lot of variations over time. It is an analog part, so there's a lot of, every bottle of wine is different. Every SID chip is different. You generally find the later model 8580 SID chip in a C64C. I personally don't find those to have as much character and life as the original 6581 SID sound, but that's the sound that I grew up with. So it really is a very personal taste kind of issue. From what I can tell from the announcements and the reporting, however, new Commodore has not done any new cost reduction around this model, other than things like the keycaps maybe being cheaper to make. It really is just a physical replacement, and they are playing up the provenance that they are making these new Commodore 64C cases out of the original plastic molds, which have improbably survived bankruptcy and fire and long sea voyages and somehow still remain viable today. According to Commodore's press release, individual computers acquired the molds in 2015, and Commodore has now bought them off of that outfit. So for you guys who are not as steeped in Commodore 64 lore as I am, have I explained this adequately? Are we clear? This is the same modern FPGA motherboard running the same familiar Ultimate 64 core inside of what amounts to two modestly different cases.
Yes.
Thank you. Some people out there have been scoffing at the sales potential of this thing. I don't know that it's to be sniffed at. Like, the C64 Ultimate is something that people are taking pretty seriously. There's a Facebook group out there for Ultimate users. That's how it's framed. It has 12,000 members. There's an unofficial sales tracker at slapsoft.com that claims that about 23,000 units have been sold to date. So I've not joined this Facebook group. I've not taken a survey, but either it's a very large percentage of the buying audience that's actively engaged on social media around this product, or it's a lot of people who aspire to own one. But either way, it's a lot of interest and momentum around something which was announced less than a year ago. So, when people are out there expressing their concern that an incremental project like this might not go well for the issuing company, I mean, maybe they're really aware that there's a very active base of people that are looking for a reason to buy something else that's very much in original Commodore's wheelhouse. Another interesting note in the discussions that have been sparked by this is people kind of going back and forth around the issue of whether they consider the first generation bread bin design or the 64C wedge to be the definitive design of 64, which made me really sit down and think about it. Like, neither design is a unique look and feel to the thing that we call the Commodore 64, because the original case was just a very slight modification of the VIC-20 design that was mostly just shifted a little bit to accommodate things like a different size cartridge port and some other mild variations. And that design was followed by the Commodore 16 bread bin, which again just modestly changed some detail on the back. And the 64C wedge was very obviously inspired by the Commodore 128's wedge design, which was then further adapted into the Amiga's 500, 600, and 1200. So it's odd that this iconic machine, about which there are there have been books and extensive videos written or whatever, but it never had its own physical presence that was truly unique to itself.
I don't agree with the people that are being negative about this. The launch last year had 3 models. They had the beige one, the clear one, and the gold one. And this is just an extension of that. This is them presumably saying it's going well enough for us to expand the range. And back in the day, of course, bread bins and C64 boards were cross-compatible, as we've already established, and it'll be the same here. So this is just a different appearance. And that's not a bad thing. And they shouldn't be criticised for it. It's an easy thing that they've done, though, because the case molds exist. They've just bought them, seemingly with all their flaws, which they're talking up their flaws rather than talking them down. A good way to do it, I guess. And all they've done is spend some money, and at the very worst, they've diluted their product offering without increasing sales. But I do think they've increased sales. I think there's people out there who had a C64C, didn't have the bread bin, and they wouldn't buy the bread bin because they had the C64C. And there's also people who bought the bread bin who will also buy the C64C because they buy these things. Personally, I like the bread bin. I think the bread bin's a much nicer looking design than the C64C. I think for the C64C, they went a bit more generic, a bit kind of everyone's getting boring, so we'll get boring. But that's just my opinion. My opinion doesn't matter because I'm not going to buy a second one. I've got my original Commodore. Original doesn't sound right. I've got the one they released last year. I'm delighted with it. It's a fantastic product, and this will be fine as well. So I'm happy with it. Good on them. I would say, though, that the big news will be when they announce the Amiga, which I have become fairly sure they're going to make happen, because as time goes on, I realise that every stakeholder involved in making this Amiga FPGA Commodore release happen, everyone's going to say, yes, I want paid, please. And that's why it'll happen. But yeah, that's my opinion. Haven't heard anything official.
No, actually, what I like about, as in going back to the original machines, the C64C, is that you can see the design evolution that led to the Amiga wedges. So you're right, Dave. It is a very personal thing, because I personally think the C64C looks great, and I don't like the bread bin. Am I allowed to say
fine.
that?
No, that's fine. I mean, that's just your opinion. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's reselling an existing product is what New Commodore are doing, but it's about the nostalgia. So I can see people who grew up with the C64C as the one they had as a kid preferring this to the bread bin case for that reason as well. So, and I think it's fantastic that they're using the original molds. I think that's a really nice touch. And well, equally happy, like you, Dave, that they may hopefully one day be doing an FPGA Amiga. I assume that's what they all want to do. We all know it's going to be the legalities that will get in the way if anything gets in the way, but hopefully, they can bring the world together in peace and make it happen. I do wonder what such a beast will cost, though.
It won't matter. It won't matter, because all those Amiga fans out there will be chucking in money hand over fist. Take my money. I don't care how much it costs. 100%. I'll pre-order it now.
100%. But which case, Dave? A500 or A1200?
Oh, A1200.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Not the 600, but the 1200. Yeah, that's my take. Right. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Kevin, what do you reckon?
What I reckon is you just reminded me of the trauma of all the different computers coming along and trying to work out whether I could sell my software for them all those years ago. And how every new one was another slice up of the market into smaller pieces, and what a pain it was. So when you're taking the Commodore, there was a VIC-20, then the C64, then the C16 and the Plus 4. For a software developer, what you really want is one machine format and be able to run the software on it. And today, I use cross-development mostly to make it work on multiple machines. But it doesn't add value when they keep creating new ones, unless they're software compatible.
Do you own any old vintage machines?
Actually, I've got them in storage, like old ZX81, Spectrum. I can't remember what else I've got because it's in New Zealand. And I haven't visited the storage for a few years. I'm in Amsterdam now.
I'll hop over and get it for you if you want.
I hope to get, yeah, please, yeah. Pay for your flight, yeah. So, I hope to go there in the next 12 months. And then I've got to dig into that storage unit, which was not intending to store it for so long. But yeah, it's in New Zealand.
Wow.
Old cassettes as well. A lot of old stuff, souvenir stuff.
So, New Commodore's press release says of this new 64C that it is just, quote, the first of several new products planned from Commodore in 2026. The company expects to announce a number of new initiatives in the coming months, from platforms to accessories that tap into both the retro and futurism pillars that Commodore is committed to, unquote. And Retro Games Limited and friends have shown that they're not afraid to make a splash at any time. Honestly, as much as these 1982 machines are obviously their happy and profitable place, I wouldn't mind seeing them try to expand the scope of what a nostalgia box can be and ship the likes of, let's say, a 386DX EGA graphics equivalent handheld or mini gamer box. And if that happens, please do let us know about it at reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro.
We are sponsored this week by PCBWay.com. PCBWay are a company that prints PCBs. They'll print any PCB you want. They will pick and place the parts on it, but they'll also do more than that. They will do 3D printing. They will do CNC milling. They'll 3D print in a variety of different materials. But what we like about PCBWay, what's unique about them, is their shared project library. And every sponsor slot, we ask Jason to take a look and see what takes him on a flight of fancy. What's got your imagination racing today, Jason?
Yes, every sponsor slot, I comply by looking at their collaboration and social media platform here where people from all around the world share their projects. They can contribute to them, or you can just order them straight up as is from PCBWay. There is an ESP32 Internet of Things water flow meter with real-time monitoring. A reminder that there's a lot of very serious things you can do, whether you're a home automation enthusiast or you are somebody who is in industrial applications, property management rather. You can do things here with home automation, water management, industrial monitoring applications with a very simple circuit here that's available from PCBWay. Also found a power management board for battery-powered projects. This is a breakout board if you are prototyping something running off of a 3.7-volt LiPo cell. Basically help you optimize your project while you're getting it designed with a battery power there. And an optical wireless communication module. This is a custom PCB for optical wireless voice communications intended for use in high-noise industrial environments such as underground mining. Again, just an amazing collaboration platform. Used to be you'd need to have an army of experts on call if you needed to solve these types of problems in a very specific industry. But today, you can literally just search for what you need in the shared project section at PCBWay.com.
Thank you for sponsoring us.
And if you would like to sponsor an upcoming episode of This Week in Retro, please write to us. We're at Twir, TWIR, at thisweekinretro.com and get those details.
A recurring theme when I look into the story submitted here and dig deep into the past of computing is that it's been done twice or more. It's things that we thought were invented for the first time in the 80s or 90s were actually invented in the 60s or 70s. And you see that for gaming and all sorts of things as well as hardware and software. And in fact, we can see that happening even now. Again and again, smartwatches took 2 tries to catch. Video calling took a few. Tablet computing, there's loads of examples. Wearable eye technology has been tried a few times, and maybe one time it will catch. There's a fascinating example, I say by far the biggest example of something being created and failing to catch, and then years later for it to be adopted by nearly everyone. And in the intro, you'll heard me say Xerox, and that's who I'm talking about today. Xerox had a research center in Palo Alto, which they called PARC, Palo Alto Research Center, so Xerox PARC. And today's submission comes from Squelch411, and it's a blog from Dave Farker. I would maintain that a time traveller from the year 2000 stepped back into 1970 and sat down and just rattled out one invention after another that we had by the year 2000 for Xerox to claim they invented. The things that were invented in Xerox PARC are incredible. I won't do it justice here. It's been done loads of times before, doesn't need done again, but there's plenty of coverage on it. But it's an incredible story. So here's the shortest summary I can do without understating it. The laser printer, Ethernet, cut, copy and paste, WYSIWYG word processing, bitmap graphics, calling things a desktop, the optical mouse, the first GUI system, and lots of smaller things within those, and several other things as well I won't go into. And when Apple launched their Apple Macintosh in 1984, and it quickly became the desktop publishing standards, it was built absolutely on the foundations built in Xerox PARC. In fact, to be accurate, it was built on the foundations of the failed product that came the year before, the Apple Lisa. More on that later. But let's not be critical, because no one knew what anyone wanted in 1983, and getting it right in 1984 was really good going. But let's move away from what Xerox PARC created to the point in this blog article. Back to Xerox himself, which, because I think that's a little bit brushed over. That's why I like this blog. It was a bit more interesting than here's Apple's foundation story. In the UK, we use the word Hoover. Now, that's because Hoover had such a grip on the vacuum cleaner market that the word Hoover is now a proper, legitimate verb to use to describe vacuum cleaning. So we say, we are Hoovering. I'll go and get the Hoover. And it can be made by anyone. And it's still, of course, a noun for the company, but mostly it means a Vax or a Dyson or something. And Xerox was the same. You Xerox something, or you would if we still had paper in offices. And Xerox had, apparently, according to the blog, Farquhar says in 1975, they had a near 100% grip on the photocopier market, which I guess explains why they could afford to fund this PARC. But they didn't manage to get these things to stick. They did release their own system, but it didn't set the heather on fire. It was enormously expensive. Perhaps it was too early. I think that's what the consensus is. But he goes on to explain that in order to sell the tech that Xerox had, they showed it to anyone who wanted to see it. And then that's, in his opinion, Xerox's mistake, because they failed to protect their IP, and that if they had sued Apple earlier, rather than towards the end of the 80s, which they did, he says they might have won. And his final point is he doesn't want to hear people say that Xerox invented everything and then they gave it away. He says it's more complicated than that. And I'm quite looking forward to Jason coming in this, because I know that, Jason, you don't entirely agree with this, I don't think. But Chris, what do you think?
No, I had no idea that Xerox had invented a lot of these things. And I think, is it one of those cases where sometimes it's not necessarily that the technology is good, but it has to wait for the marketing to catch up. So for somebody to come along, understand how to sell it, and then that's when it actually takes off.
I read the article and I found it very interesting, because I had heard the story that Steve Jobs went and saw the user interface, the mouse, the pointer and everything, and basically stole it for Apple. And Xerox weren't smart enough to protect themselves. But what I found interesting in the article was that they were under antitrust regulations that were limiting their ability to sell stuff, and they had to license out their inventions. So they didn't see themselves as being able to keep hold of things as much as they might because of the antitrust regulations that were limiting them. That was news to me. I hadn't read that before. I only knew the Steve Jobs stole it story.
Jason, smash it to pieces.
First, I just want to ask, guys. The Steve Jobs, stole it or saw it or whatever. I did. Did you guys watch the story as dramatized by monologuist Mike Daisy and performed by yours truly?
Yeah.
Okay, then maybe we'll include a little link to that. Because the story, kind of the received wisdom is actually that Xerox, that PARC would welcome in their Silicon Valley, colleagues and say, like, look what we're doing. So whether this was stealing or whether this was adapting. Kevin, I'm not sure that I buy Farquhar's argument that Xerox was taking a tentative approach to commercializing its inventions just to avoid more antitrust action. Because he says, they were reluctant to patent things after that. There was the antitrust consent decree, which is usually you don't usually get broken up as a monopoly, even in the most aggressive times here. You get some sort of we're going to operate under what they call a consent decree. So they had to license out their patents because I did a quick search, and there are tons and tons of computer and computing-related patents that are assigned to Xerox in the decade starting in 1976. So perhaps there's a deeper story here that Farquhar couldn't capture in his blog, but on the surface of it, I don't understand what point he's trying to make. So if his point is just to agitate for people to not like point and laugh at Xerox like they're a bunch of dopes, like that's fair enough, because I would say owning the future of tech and doing so on a consistent basis, like consistently winning in this industry, it's crazy hard. And it's one of the reasons why Microsoft and Apple are such standouts, because they keep ending up on the winner's podium generation after generation. And, you know, in Apple's case, surviving the generation where they didn't. And I think in the 21st century, we should probably be, you know, offering hat tips to the likes of Sony, Samsung, Nintendo, which have all been on, you know, quite a multi-generation run of success / survival as well. One thing that we'll probably have to delve into this in another, you know, episode when we come around to this, but you know, there was that Xerox Star workstation that, yes, like, well, did we need to, you know, commercialize it differently? There was this trend around 1980 where these different companies, Apple with their Apple IIIs, Xerox with the Star, they would say, great, we're gonna create these serious high-end workstations. Apple did it again with the Lisa. We're going to create these high-end workstations, and they have a defined market, and that's what we're going to do. And they would do it, and they would sell into those markets, and then somebody would say, oh, but we thought we would sell, you know, somebody else says, we thought we should sell millions of them, so we're going to shut this down. It's like, well, what are we trying to do? There are other complications as well. You know, we've talked about interest rates and so forth, but you know, yeah, the Xerox story is complicated, and again, winning is hard. Kevin.
Yeah, I just like to add a couple of things from experience. One is I've worked for a lot of large companies, and Xerox were a very large company at the time. Before I worked for them, I assumed that they were large because they were really good at what they did. Having worked for them, I realized that they are mostly incompetent, but they keep going because of the momentum they have and the finance that they can attract. They're much less efficient and well organized than smaller companies, in my experience. And the other thing just came to mind is how good people are at killing their own stuff sometimes. And for some reason, I thought the Osborne 1 computer and a very successful portable luggable. And I remember the guy who owned it saying, you think the Osborne 1 is great, wait till you see the Osborne 2, and managed to kill the sales before the Osborne 2 was ready and kill the company, kill his own success. So there's some great examples around, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think, Jason, you have got the point in the article right. I think that the point is that it's easy to criticize with hindsight, but if we look back to the 70s and the 80s, no one really knew what computing would end up looking like. No one knew how cheap it would get. And with that in mind, it's just complicated. There's no simple look at those dummies and look at these brilliant people. It's complicated. I think that's what the point maybe was. And companies have to have a little bit of luck. Although, to your point about Microsoft and Apple, why are they consistently lucky? It must be somewhat down to skill. Well,
Microsoft thought the internet was not going to be anything of any value. So, but they can adjust. I mean, that's what I meant about how these big companies, they've got the capital, they can adapt and survive, whereas a smaller company making the mistakes they make would crumble and fail, like Osborne.
There was a documentary a few years ago which declared 1982 the greatest geek, 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 greatest greatest geek, greatest singer, greatest geek, greatest geek, greatest geek, greatest geek, geek, greatest geek.
That wasn't just me.
On to housekeeping, and I want to welcome on a new cohort of patrons. I don't know what was so good last week, but thank you very much to us, to the new team that's joined. So thank you to James, thank you to Mike, thank you to Jerome, thank you to Anthony, thank you to Andy, and thank you to Helgi, who are all new official twirlers. Thank you for joining up as patrons. If you wanted to become a patron, where would you go, Chris?
You go to patreon.com/This Week in Retro.
So thank you very much.
When you join, you can do what Andy did. You're allowed to say, why did you join, and leave a little comment. Andy's to us was, as an aging bald man, I like waving at other aging bald men. Thank you, Andy. Oh, bonus wave from Dave. Nice. And another social comments. We had a follow-up from Greg Brooks on Bluesky after the arcade discussion last week. Greg said, I worked in the arcades in Wildwood, New Jersey on the boardwalk for a few years. So Dave was trying to talk about boardwalk arcades. One thing missing from the convo is the spectacle of lights, boardwalk crowds, carnival games, etc. Behind the scenes, the pressure as this entire town makes all its money in just a few summer months. Games must be up. For example, a single outdoor-facing Dance Dance Revolution could make $2,000 in a weekend. Sega Outrun tournament, so he knows who he's talking to, called by the owner on a microphone next to penny slots. We had to carry parts and tools for live repairs. It was all a bit duct tape and bubblegum holding it together behind the scenes. So look into that boardwalk arcade scene from Greg. Thank you.
And our drive for reviews continues, and we got 2 last week, so you must love us. Thank you very much. We got one from Electric Pause who says, take a trip back to a better time. Twitter is a highlight of every weekend. And Robin's had a really quite innovative review. He's given us 5 stars, and he's given us, did anyone count the thumbs up? A whole
I did
load
not
of thumbs
count.
up.
It's just a plethora.
Thank you very much to both of you. We do appreciate the reviews on your podcast platform of choice.
16.
16 thumbs up.
17 if you include the one next to the smiley face right at the top.
Yeah, that's the title of it. So
17 thumbs up. On to news and briefs. And Microsoft have continued their open sourcing drive, and this time it's DOS 1.0. Thank you to Matt B 2014. This is where it all started for Microsoft, buying someone else's stuff and selling it.
Oh, drive-by. Ouch.
Oof. The search engine you didn't realize still existed, Ask Jeeves, is closing. Maybe that would have been a great name for an AI instead of Gemini or whatever. Thanks to King of the Potato people for making us aware of that anyway.
I can't believe, this should be their time to shine.
I know. Ask Jeeves.
It's right there.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Ask Jeeves.
Yeah.
Jeeves came back and says, well, here's the answer. Because that's the way they wanted it to be back in the day.
It's adapt or die.
It's wild.
The firmware for FujiNet, the all-singing and dancing networking add-on, and so much more now, for Atari 8-bits and actually a whole range of other retro computers has been updated to a new 1.6.0 release. Thank you to FV Research for letting us know. Many of the changes are behind the scenes, but they've also improved performance of FTP, NFS, Samba, and other networking capabilities.
And the horror game revival continues. There's a 7th Guest remake. It now has an official release date in its trailer of June 4th. We will see if that 1990s full-motion video still holds any scares.
Naoki's 28 linked us to a Windows subsystem, and the link wouldn't work, but it looked good when I read it. So, link in the show notes. Maybe I've tantalized you with the unknown.
Yeah, this was, so getting that subsystem in classic Windows 95, 98. Usually that was reserved for the kind of newer NT-based ones, but this is this virtual Linux inside Windows 9X. And Dave said that there was more Apple Lisa news coming. There's now a Lisa implementation on FPGA, this pre-Macintosh GUI-based workstation with the quirky, weird-looking floppy disks and the unusual screen aspect ratio is up and running as a prototype recreation. The creator, Alex Electronics, mentions that it can run up to 75 megahertz, which is a lot faster than the Lisa's original 68,000 CPU, and that this core will be released as open source on GitHub when his work is finalized. It's a fun video.
And if a new C64, a handheld C64, and a handheld ZX Spectrum aren't enough, there's a new Sega Mega Drive being released on the 1st of June in Lego. So thanks, Elk1984, for letting us know about that.
And a last brief this week, Pajako6502. We worked him into the show after all. He links us to a work in progress of, I had never seen this before, Galaxian 3, Galaxian Cubed, Project Dragoon, and emulation. This is a 3D rail shooter, not the Galaxian experience that I'm familiar with, but if you are an enthusiast, you'll be interested to follow this. And if you've got other news items to share with us, upvote, downvote, participate in the comments. That's all at reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro.
Well, just like how 1955 was a focal point for the Back to the Future series, it would seem that 1982 is a retro technology focal point, at least for this episode. And this was completely unplanned, by the way, we will be returning to 1982 in this next story shared with us by Dr. Local. Well, funnily enough, this is kind of like a retro inception because the story is actually a BBC Archive YouTube drop from 1992 in which the presenter Ian McNaught Davis looks back with his career nostalgia at the previous decade of the BBC Computer Literacy Project. Hence, he discusses how computing and the project evolved from its inception in 1982 through to the year of this flashback, which was 1992, and the episode was titled The Trojan Mouse. In wonderfully polished BBC style, they talk about everything from the government drive to make Britain computer literate through the television program and also the schools program that they were pushing out. The legend of Acorn essentially creating a working prototype for the tender within 3 days, and how in 1992, the BBC's computer room, Aircon, was still being run by a BBC Micro. And they go into other uses of that historic machine as well, such as in small businesses. And by way of referencing an earlier program, the Horizon Report, they also discussed the evolution of computing from the impact of the invention of the microprocessor and the ability to reduce a room full of computer mainframes down to the size of a desktop machine. They talk about Clive Sinclair and the affordability of machines available for as little as £100. John Radcliffe, who was former executive producer of the BBC Computer Literacy Project, says on the program how computers were going to be important, affect everybody's lives, and that their job in the project was to give people some understanding of what they, computers, were and what they could do. David Allen, former project editor, mentions how everyone was, quote, terribly worried about the social impact of these things, end quote. And how the Germans called the microprocessor the job killer. I find easy to miss quotes like this really interesting, given how now in 2026, we're having the exact same discussions about new technology all over again. And another interesting quote from this program is from Herman Hauser, co-founder of Acorn Computers, who says, I know you're listening to this, guys, because it's really important, because this is the UK market we're talking about here. Herman says, quote, in 1984, there was a total collapse of the home computer market, end quote. He basically goes on to describe what we now understand as the hype cycle, how people got over the excitement and they bought too much into the technology, and then they realized it didn't actually do everything they thought it did. So guys, the global collapse wasn't just the North American collapse, apparently. I think maybe from a business perspective, the boom and bust were very real in the UK, as well as America. But as kids, we were just wanting to play games. So maybe we were oblivious. What do you think?
Okay, Kevin's the right man to ask. I mean, he was in the industry in the 80s. Did it collapse in 1984? Did it?
Yeah, I remember the downturn. Yeah, I remember it. There was a sudden, because it was like accelerating so fast, expanding so fast, and then it hit the buffers suddenly and unexpectedly. I can remember that. Yeah. So yeah, there was a downturn.
This relate to the computer you're talking about that didn't make it? Is that when because there was an explosion of all these enterprise things that appeared in the market that didn't really catch on, and the only one I think that managed to survive is the Amstrad, of course, the Amstrad CPC, because they put so much money behind launching it. Is that to do with this thing? Is that the same thing we're talking about here?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the precise timing, but it sounds right. There was like a new computer. So just taking the hardware side, there was a new computer coming out so frequently and that's why as a software provider, like, we were a games company, it was a problem because each one was trying to create a new market with incompatible hardware. So it's like, do we support this? Do we, Football Manager is famous for it being on many, many platforms. It wasn't on all of them because I had to work out each time, is it worth adapting it to this platform? And some of them lasted a very short time, like the C16 plus 4 lasted a few months. Others didn't take off at all, and I'm sure. So there was definitely a problem with hardware sales not succeeding. So they were all jumping in, and then the market wasn't big enough for them, and they were all falling by the wayside. So that was happening on the hardware side, and it was a headache on the software side as well. So yeah, there was a period around that time. I don't remember precisely, but 1984, 85 sounds right when sales growth changed.
Why is Jason grinning?
I'm grinning because this is a great catch, Chris, and brave of you to fly in the face of many of your Gen X UK colleagues that say, oh, we only went from strength to strength. Oh, the Americans, they were eating gruel and they were sad and they were miserable and they hated video games, but we thrived. Because, yeah, of course, But yes, here's one of your great British computer heroes saying flat out that there were serious problems. As you put it, the market collapsed. Yes, it's a reminder that the truth is always more complicated than somebody writing a retrospective, 40 years later. And another reminder, like I mentioned in an earlier story, interest rates were much higher then than they were now. So, companies in the main, they could not fund or didn't feel that they could fund losing quarters, quarter after quarter for nearly as long as in the 21st century where you've got comparatively free money. Like that's what enabled companies like Amazon to run at a big loss, quarter after quarter, because the money was free. That was not the case in 1983, 1984. You're right that the hype cycle is a thing. But I think there was an even bigger problem that a lot of the home computer vendors did not know what to do for their next act, or rather they picked something that was not a good idea. And we've talked on this show about how that jump to 16-bit machines, Dave, you alluded to some of these, enterprise class things that were coming out. That led to dramatically higher prices that either consumers that had already bought a machine were not interested in absorbing, or the ones that had stayed on the sidelines were like, well, you didn't hear me when I didn't want to buy this for $400. Why would I want to buy it for $2,400? Like, no, thank you. We do know that some outfits were better at squeezing out costs and or continuing to command high prices, Apple, than others. But we know that some companies, and Kevin, you mentioned Commodore's 16 and plus 4 line. There were definitely others, Mattel Aquarius, Spectra Video 318. These are companies or these are product lines that were trying to grow their business by putting out computers which were aggressively and undeniably worse than the generation that they were following.
Is that how they marketed them?
It practically was, and they were trying to find the bottom of the market, and in doing so, in putting out products that really were not of saleable quality, it did not go well for any concerned. So yes, Chris, kudos to you for spotting that, because I admit when I was watching the video, I kind of let that go past me, and I was more reacting to the maybe this is a little bit of hyperbole, but you flagging it, Kevin talking about it, like this is an important primary source who was very invested in the business at the time. And again, I'm sure we'll come back to this at another time, but like I can just watch looking at magazine ads that you guys had, the way that your full price games, the ceiling price of them collapsed at this time because that was what was necessary to keep you guys buying.
Yeah, and I think the other point is I feel that mostly around that time, with the new computers coming along, they hadn't really got a handle on the fact that it's the software that sells. It's the available software, which is the strength, always was the strength of the Sinclair range and the C64. And putting out a new computer that has new specs that are slightly better than a 64 or slightly better than a Spectrum isn't going to do it if there isn't the software support. Because, I mean, one of the things I get is, it's quite poignant, people who got the Electron, for example, and saying that in the playground all their mates had Spectrums and Commodore 64s and they could never trade any games, which of course was illegal, pirating games, but they felt left out because they weren't part of the main group. And of course these new computers were doing the same thing. They were thinking that they could just establish a new brand, and there was so many of them as well.
I wonder if the market was still rapidly expanding, but not as fast as these new things were expanding. I wonder if it was overshooting what their expectations of an increasing demand was, because I don't think it's in doubt that the market continued to grow year on year, but not quite the way that was anticipated.
Saturation, perhaps, of a market.
Yeah, it's true.
But to tie it back to Xerox, that was at the time a mega international conglomerate that was funding this research and development, compared to, let's just to say, Sinclair Research, which sure they had turnover, they had growth, but they did not have the kind of R&D resources that a Xerox did a decade earlier, and they were being tasked with, can we get to the next thing? Can we get to the next thing affordably? Can we get to the next thing, to Kevin's point, with software infrastructure at launch? And those are very, very hard things to do.
I'd just like to pick up on that one, because Sinclair is like it's a sad thing. The ZX81, then the Spectrum, and the home computing industry in the UK, there was enormous momentum of lots of games companies writing software for those. And then the QL came along. I would have been like many others, wanting to support it straight away, had to be on microdrive. That simple fact killed the ability for us to provide software for it. And that was a bad choice, I think.
Yeah.
True. Funnily enough, that quote did stand out to me, Jason, because I was one of those that would go, "No, there was no crash in the UK." So to hear it as close to the horse's mouth as you can get, it's like, okay, I need to sit up and pay attention here. Anyway, the video is great from the BBC archive. It goes for 30 minutes. There's no way I'm going to be able to unpack and spoil the whole thing here. But what really comes across in it for me is how much changed in computing in just 10 years back then. I mean, you think about it in the same time frame now, I'm still rocking a PS4. That's more than 10 years old, and it still feels mostly current. And I don't feel the need to upgrade it to a PS5. And the same could be said of the PS3 before the PS4. But back in the 80s and early 90s, there's a huge difference between a BBC Micro playing text adventures and a PC playing X-Wing or Wolfenstein 3D. That's a 10-year time period you're talking about there. That's a huge change. So what strikes you guys most about archive programs like this, but also the speed at which tech advances then versus now?
Well, and I know we're running late, so I would love to come back and talk about computer literacy project mythology another time. For some reason, this whole thing never surfaced in the time that I was very engaged with the UK computing scene in the 1990s, as a reader and later prolific writer for UK computer magazines. It's really only when I started paying more attention to this show, other UK-centric retro media, over the past 5-10 years, that CLP really came to the fore. But so we'll talk about that again before the heat death of the universe. But I really found it odd from the BBC, which, by the way, doing a victory lap. Hey, congratulations, our program and our computers. Look at what a great job we did. But weird that this professional news organization did not caption the speakers being interviewed at the convention. Like, I want to know who those people are. I want to get them on the show. Who are they? Where are they? If you were in that video or who was, please let us know. I'd love to hear more from you.
Did the computer literacy program get you started on coding, Kevin, or did you get started in another way?
No. When I started watching that program, the first thing I saw was the tape drives being loaded. I was actually a programmer programming mainframes which had tape drives.
Right.
So I started. I'm unusual, it seems, as I found out by experience, because I was already a professional programmer before I got my hands on home computers. And you talk about changing over time. I can't help remembering I was working at the Open University in 1981, it would have been, so just before that period, and talking to a data processing manager who owned the computer, they owned the computer, I guess, the mainframe computer, and his quote was amazing. We ask the users what they want, and then we tell them what they're going to get, and that has that for user friendliness. But
I know some programmers that still work that way.
At the same time as he was still working in his ivory tower on that same campus, I would see professors with home computers bringing them into their offices because they found it so hard to get access to the mainframe computer. They started doing their own stuff on their own home computers. So it was a huge revolution in that time, no question. And the BBC part is interesting too, because what my memory of the BBC is, it was great that they did it, but it was an overspecified machine and too expensive for most people. So it was a luxury to have. And it seems like a shame that, I might be a little bit biased towards Sinclair, but Sinclair's lean and mean approach wasn't adopted to produce something more available for people. Acorn got it, but Acorn got it with all this specification wasn't needed, which then was stripped down to make an Electron. But however, I did think it's amazing because with the BBC behind it, maybe we could have had a BBC PC becoming the standard instead of an IBM PC.
Convenience.
Would have been a nice thing. Yeah, good machines, but too expensive.
A risky approach.
Yeah, risky. Very good.
Very risky. Anyway, I watched this video primarily for discussion on this program, but I'm going to watch it again in a more laid-back time when I can just relax and take it in because there's so much packed in, and it really is a reminder of how fast things moved back then, but also the social impact that we lived through, that no one will live through again. We've literally lived through a life from having no computers in the home to having one in your pocket that's, infinitely more powerful than what we had back then, but also always connected and feeding us everything all the time, whether we want it or not. And that's probably not the only computer in your home either. You're surrounded by them, whether you like it or not, in the form of smart TVs, home assistants, laptops, tablets, whatever. Heck, we've even got, well, funnily enough, you say fridge, we've got a cooking appliance in our house. I'm not a very good cook. I need the instructions. So this particular cooking appliance needs to be connected to the Wi-Fi or I can't make a decent chili. Right? That's how addicted to technology we are now. It's an insane leap. But the other thing I learned from watching this episode, thanks to the overlay of Ian McNaught Davis walking through the corridors of Television House, was the keypad entry code to the computer, the mainframe room that you described, Kevin, for the BBC. So if you're interested in breaking into Television House and the computer room, I think A, you're going to have to time travel because they've now moved to a different location, but B, the door code is 6124. Time now for our community question of the week. And last week's question was, what's the scariest, most horrifying or revolting moment you've had with a classic video game? So I believe we're at a contest mode. Is that right, guys?
That is right.
Fantastic. Kevin, do you want to read up the top answer for us?
Yes. Colony activist, Resident Evil, when that blooming dog jumps through the window, it gets me every time.
That was a good gaming moment, I must say. It really was. Who's next?
Next one, we actually had basically the same answer with the same number of votes. So Boro Paul and Nick Farley both go Rescue on Fractalus. Boro Paul says, well, I love 3D Monster Maze, but the favorite was Rescue on Fractalus. Nick Farley, why has this astronaut got a green helmet? That's odd. Full on screen when a screen-sized alien popped up. Even better was not telling my brother and getting him to play the game, knowing what would happen.
It's such an achievement in that game, what they managed to do. And I agree with this next one. It's from Stewpot Seb. He says, as a kid, it was definitely Electric Dream's ZX Spectrum version of Aliens. Well, it's a CPC one I played, but the same one. It's the Aliens, the computer game. Not Aliens, the computer game. And the one that came out in 1987, not the one that came out in 1987. The ZX Spectrum's lack of sound actually added to the atmosphere for a change as you silently scanned the corridors until beeps and clicks warned you that something was nearby, watching your team getting picked off. On many occasions, as the alien jump scared me for the 10th time, I would turn my specky off and go watch Blue Peter or something else family-friendly to take me back to a happy place.
I'm sorry, that's classic Spectrum cope. It was better that we didn't have sound.
Oh, dear. Imaginary Swing 8606 says that ear-piercing scream from Friday the 13th, even more horrific than the game. So, there you go.
A lot of interesting answers to this one.
Yeah.
Do we have
Forbidden
a new
Force
question for this week?
We do go on, Dave.
No, I spoke over the top of Jason. He was going to mention something.
I was mentioning, things like Forbidden Forest got to mention. Definitely a frightening game in the C64. A lot of interesting new and old selections there as well. So thanks everybody for jumping in on this one.
Nice. Well, the new question of the week is a good one, I think. You can add another handheld to the up-and-coming The C64 and The Spectrum line. What retro system are you picking? Has to begin with the word "the," I assume.
Yeah, stick the word "the" as many times as you can, as many times as you incredibly fit into the answer for bonus points.
Nice.
Thank you for joining us, Kevin. It's been a delight to have you on. I hope you enjoyed it. If you would like to see what Kevin's doing, we'll have links in the show notes where you can go and play Kevin's games. And the boxed edition will be coming out soon. Again, links in the show notes.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks. Enjoyed the conversation.
And we will see you next week. Do we have a guest next week?
We do.
Another guest.
They just keep coming on.
Another guest. Yeah. I know who the guest is next week. That's interesting. Yeah. Looking forward to next week. We will see you then, folks. Bye.
Bye.
For you, Andy.
We're all waving.
To Andy.
Yeah. Bye, Andy.
Andy's waving. Kevin's waving. Dave's waving. I'm not waving. I am waving. Bye.
This Week in Retro was written and presented by Chris from 005 AGIMA, Jason from the Retro Adventurers, and Dave. It was edited by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcast app, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/This Week in Retro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. Please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.